Today's guest is Rich Cruz, who is the co-founder of WorkBalance Consulting and organizational development consulting firm. He has an MS from Purdue in I guess IO psychology. I don't
Yep.
actually
Industrial organizational psychology. Yep.
industrial organizational psychology. Okay. An MBA. He's also certified in OD and change leadership from the Drucker School of Management. So, Rich, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
Well, how are you?
Doing pretty good. As I was telling you before our recording, this has been like a very like recording and Zoom heavy day, like with other podcasts and clients. So we're like I said, we're saving the best for last for today. We're gonna see how this goes. And yeah,
A lot of pressure or
how
no
can I
pressure at all. Whatever.
yeah, no pressure at all. Exactly. So how can I best support you today?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks a million for having me on your podcast. When I saw an opportunity to be on here, I had to jump at the chance. I think, for me, it's we started this company. And when I say we, it's me and my associate Cheryl. We were both students at Purdue at the same time. So I had been doing marketing consulting and had been an executive for a number of years, and she has been doing operations in the entertainment business. And we've both been displaced from those full-time jobs and have gone into doing this full time. And we have some pretty decent clients, but we need to get more of that. And I think I'm really probably stepping on my own toes. You're that first part of your series of emails that talks about it's a me problem. You're right. So that's what I'm here for. Let's figure
Okay,
out what that me problem is so I can get to fixing it.
love it. So as like a first intuitive hit on what that me problem might be, like, well, what comes to mind?
Um, I think one of the things that comes to mind, I have a hard time saying no to just about anything. Yeah, so I do a lot of kind of volunteer work that probably should not be volunteer work. I've been told that throughout the years. That's one thing. Um, I work a lot on the how do I put this? The minutia and the things that kind of I feel need to happen rather than the things that really should happen. Um, so there's some prioritization issues there. Um, and then there's a little bit of fear, frankly, because I used to own a business. I used to own a sign company back during that thing, that recession that we had, if you remember that at all, 2008. So I've gone there. I've lost everything, literally bankruptcy, foreclosure, lost the car, lost every, it was just a crazy whirlwind time. I guess that's the life of an entrepreneur, though, because you rebound and you come back and you do it again. But that's what I'm trying to avoid this time. We're on the path to success. That's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Yeah. And ironically, I actually worked at a sign shop around that time as well. So I know
Did you?
I did. I did. I was essentially helping the owner of the sign shop. It was also a small business, but I was kind of brought in through mutual acquaintances to like help them with a lot of like the business development stuff. And
Yeah.
that's a story in and of its day, but it's just funny. Like I think I haven't spoken to anybody yet that was in like the sign shop business because it's such a niche business. So that's
Now you got it.
there you go. Okay, so
Good to be here.
it's a one of like firsts for this one. So you get the gold star and the prize for that. So there.
Hey, all right. All right.
Okay, so with regards to what you shared, so it seems like right now there is, like I said, the fear of repeating, this very tumultuous, traumatic experience of having to lose everything,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
get that because my gym, like I don't know if you know what you know about my story, but I owned a gym for 10 years as well.
Hmm.
That ended up imploding because I was avoiding a lot of these things. So I
Yeah.
understand that whole experience of having to like not just dig yourself out of a hole, but also to basically reinvent yourself. So, I get that fear very, very vividly. And then on the behavior side of things, right, you're saying, okay, so I have these people pleasing tendencies of like it's hard for me to say no. And that's generally kind of the category that I put that behavior under. Like I
Yep.
say
Yep.
no, or rather, I say yes when I know I should be saying no. I volunteer a lot of my time. That puts me in situations where essentially I'm giving away a lot of value for free, even though technically, like we need more sales and I should be getting paid for this. And I work a lot on the minutia. So I stay ready, or rather, I do a lot of things just to kind of be busy instead of doing a lot of the things that I know is going to move the needle forward. So
Right.
just before we go on, like, does that kind of encapsulate
Yep. Yep.
where you are right now? Okay.
Yep. And on the so just a little bit of clarification on the don't say no part, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of books out there that say yes to like everything, right? Until you make it, right? But uh, I think one of my problems with all of that is, there's this exposure, like people say, hey, you're going to get a lot of exposure doing this or that or the other thing, and there's some truth to that. I mean, I've been exposed to things that would probably never have done before unless I said, hey, let me get there and do that with you. But you can't you can't pay the bills at exposure. So, or at least just exposure anyway. So
So, I mean, I understand how like that piece can work out in like a marketing sense of just like a
yeah.
we're kind of out there, and yeah, there's filtering to do on that piece as well, 100%.
Hmm.
Um, do you find that that also shows up when it comes to like client deliverables? Like I will
Yeah.
overwork
Yeah.
to overgive instead of overdeliver, right? And my
That's right.
distinction with that is like you overdeliver an experience. Like if you go to a restaurant and somebody's like super nice and you're over delivering, but like overgiving is like, you know, here's 10 other meals that you didn't actually like order, right? It just
That's right.
feels, yeah. Okay.
That I do an awful lot of that part of
Okay.
it.
Got it. So overgiving in
Yeah.
that instance. Okay.
Yeah. Don't mind over delivering, but yeah, there's a lot of over giving, and then, frankly, it diminishes my value, that I give. So
Got it. So that is going to be a very direct um like profit leak, right? Because if we're
hmm
constantly over delivering, we're never actually charging for it. That's a lot of time that's spent towards that. There's a lot of expectations built on like, okay, well now I don't need to charge for the next thing, right? If they do another round of, whatever the work deliverables are, it's like, well, now you've set the expectation they're going to give all this stuff if they didn't know it was a favor. So it kind of compounds in a negative direction. So is
Yep.
that your experience
That's,
of it?
oh boy. Yeah. For
Okay,
sure.
got it. So if we're looking at these, so you have these behaviors of the overgiving, the getting lost in minutia, right? And these kind of fears that drive all of this. Okay. So what are like the thoughts that go through your head when you are making these decisions or in these situations?
So, a couple of the thoughts are, first of all, because I deal a lot with small businesses, business owners, some part of me feels like, oh, they probably can't afford me right now, so I'll just go in and be altruistic and help them. That's one part, right? Some other thoughts are, oh, this person maybe, um, yeah, I definitely have an opportunity to help them out, right? Um, if I do this for them, then I can get more advanced in how I work with them. But that's not always the case, and I don't define that ahead of time. So, so sometimes it's, oh, I did this low cost thing for you, or discounted myself, but I'm never going to get to that higher tier that I was looking to try to get. Um, some of the other thoughts, frankly, are a little bit of self-doubt, frankly. So sometimes it's, gee, I don't know if I can help them. So, maybe I don't have the skills or the experience or whatever to do this. So, yeah, so sometimes it's like, okay, I'll do this so I can get that, experience, and I'll do it at a discount. And I mean, sometimes that's valid, but other times it's like, no, I've done this before. Why am I doing that again? You
Okay.
know.
So what's the percentage of that? Like where it's like
Oh,
legitimate experience and skill building versus overgiving.
well, at my age now, it's probably too much on the bad side because I've done a lot of stuff, you know. So it's there's I can't say there's I mean there's a lot of stuff outside of my ken. It's a lot of things that I wouldn't do. You know, if you asked me to do engineering or something like that, you're barking up the wrong tree, you know. But you know, on the OD or you know, change leadership or change management or um marketing or any of these other, you know, skills that fall under my purview. I can do it, I can scale it for any kind of business, really, but that kind of imposter syndrome, for lack of a better word, it hits, and when it hits, I like discount myself before somebody has an objection, if that makes sense.
Got it. So you don't actually even give yourself a fair chance to get the bigger job.
Right.
Okay. Got it. So this whole like kind of mini discussion started because I asked you, okay, well, what percentage of your time is spent in this overgiving mode versus this kind of, okay, I'll do it for a discount to skill build. So where your brain went to was kind of giving me like a higher resolution of the problem. Like you just kind of explain the problem.
Right.
Like it kind of skirted, which happens, right? This is what our
Yeah,
brains do,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Go
what do
back
you
to your
think is
question.
the actual percentage? Like if we have to go back to the question, yes.
Uh, I mean, am I gonna, is it 80% of what I do? I mean, in the sense that, you know, I'm not anywhere near the sales figures, and there's the issue, right? As I'm spending all this time on these, yeah, I've spent all this time on these other things, right? And not the prospecting, not the lead generation and that type of stuff, you know. So yeah, I would say, I mean, right now it's like absolutely inverse to what it should be, you know. So maybe 80% of the time I'm overdoing that stuff that's probably getting in the way of the stuff that I should be doing,
Okay, so 80% of my time is spent in the overdoing and in the overgiving.
and the overdoing and the overgiving.
Okay.
Because yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So when you vocalize that, and I appreciate the candidness with which you shared that, because I think many business owners are actually in this situation, but they kind of don't really like to admit it. In your instance, when you vocalize it, how does that make you feel?
that's a hard thing to hear but it's I mean it's true. I mean, I just said it, but it's yeah, it makes you pause and go, man, why am I doing it that way?
Yeah. So again, I acknowledge you for the courage it takes to admit what a lot of other people will just kind of hunker down and try to ignore and push away, somewhere until it kind of blows up in their face. So if 80% of your time is spent overdoing and overgiving, that means there is a part of you, oftentimes very subconscious, that almost has a need to overgive because it will somehow make me okay. It'll somehow keep me safe. It'll somehow keep me secure. Like there's various different definitions with which it'll manifest. So,
Yeah.
I see you shaking your head. So, what is landing from that?
Yeah, so there's this I have to keep doing something. I have to keep doing something for somebody. And that something for somebody, whether it's paid or not, or you know, or at a discount, whatever, I feel like I constantly have to keep doing something. And it's oftentimes, I guess it's just for the sake of doing it. You know,
Yeah.
um,
So if you weren't doing that, then fill in the blank.
Uh, well, if I wasn't doing that type of stuff, like one of the nice parts about when I had the sign companies, I had these employees and I could have them do this production work, right? And I could go out and sell, right? And that was the way that that worked. So right now I'm doing both this delivery and things like that. So I'm not leveraging anybody else to do that kind of stuff. So that's probably a big problem,
Sure.
especially the small stuff like website updates and stuff like that. Um, so because I don't have anybody that's doing that. And then um, I would probably be doing stuff like more. I keep saying, and my wife will attest to this. Like I I want to write more. I want to write a book. I want to do more podcasts, and I do want to kind of speak and teach. And when it comes to like the organizational development type of stuff, I want to be involved in a select few number of companies, right? That are where I'm in there as a trusted advisor. I've done this type of work. I do this type of work, but I need more of those types of relationships, and that takes time. And when I don't have the time to put into that, then I'm not gonna build that trust.
Got it. So this 80% that I spend overdoing and overgiving, the consequences of that is basically it's taken away from the stuff that you want to do to live your version of like your rich life, right? Like
Right,
write a book, I want to speak, I want to teach, I want to be a trusted advisor in other companies, I want to build these relationships. And ultimately, like I want to have enough to be able to create the leverage to have a team, etc. Like that
right,
is the
right.
picture of like what it is that I want. And
Yeah,
it seems that right now on the surface, like what's getting in the way of that is this overgiving pattern. It's working in the minutia and the overdoing, spending 80% of my time doing that. And then that seems to be powered by this fear, either like if I don't keep doing, I'm going to keep repeating the past and the failure of the past. And even when I do have the opportunity to get new business, these narratives around, well, essentially like I argue myself out of the sale, right? They can't afford me, so I'm going to be altruistic and give them stuff. This the imposter syndrome, etc. So like,
yeah, yeah.
is that accurate as far as like what is your experience of all of
Yep,
this? Okay.
yep.
And what's happening for you internally when I reflect that back?
Um, I mean, I'm nodding my head because that's how I feel. I mean, it makes me question how do I get myself out of that part, um, and how do I be less in, how do I put this? Be I don't want to say a little more like cutthroat or anything, but how do yeah, I mean there is a certain level of competitiveness and aggression that's somebody probably needs to be an entrepreneur, and I'm probably not focusing that type of creative and driving part of me. Um, so I question why am I not doing that that part of it?
Got it. And that's a great question. And what I would reflect back initially is I don't think you necessarily need aggressiveness in its classical sense. To me, what it sounds like what you need more of is assertiveness.
Right, right.
Right.
So
Like I
yeah,
don't
that's
need to
good.
be the one that's going to go into the boardroom, yell and slam things and, be that individual
No,
'cause I don't
that's
feel like
exactly
that's
what
who
I
you are.
right. That's exactly what I tell companies not to do.
Correct. Right.
Right,
And I think
exactly.
it's the right answer because I don't think that's like going to lead to a you're a happy life, even if you were that person. You know what I mean?
Right.
So to me, it sounds like the missing quality that currently is not part of your identity is assertiveness. And
Assertiveness.
when I define identity, I define it as like, am I thinking, feeling, and acting in alignment with the leadership that's needed for the business goals that I have, right?
Right.
It's
Sure.
my working definition of identity as far as like the work that I do and the people that I serve. It's not the be all end all definition of identity. So right
Right.
now, if you look at everything that we spoke about, like what you think, feel, and act in your current identity is basically the lagging indicator of what you thought, felt, and did yesterday and in your past.
Hmm.
So if I continuously have thoughts of, well, they probably can't afford me, so the altruistic thing to do is to give them, the thing for discount or for free. If I give them this, they'll give me more. If I have self-doubt, if I discount myself, maybe something good will happen. Like that is the narrative
Hmm.
that has created a part of my identity, right? It's
Right.
rooted in a lot of fear and scarcity. Like if I don't give them these things, then they will be, whatever the consequence your mind thinks is going to happen. And this part of who I'm being, what I'm thinking and feeling, ultimately goes into, well, then I overgive, I overdo because I have to be altruistic. If there's a scarcity feeling internally that I have to continue to do, then I always got to be busy and in the minutia. And the consequence of that is, well, 80% of my time is spent doing, like overdoing and overgiving.
Sure.
Cumulatively, and I don't mean this in any judgmental way, but it's like cumulatively, my identity is perfectly aligned with the results that I'm experiencing.
Hmm.
So this is just kind of a paint the picture contextually. What lands for you from that share?
Um, well, so as you were talking about some of that and talking about identity, I started thinking about like the Gallup Strengths Finder, right? And like some of the things that come to mind, like I come up as being restorative, individual, like where I tend to the individual, so I these things are so I get like these intrinsic rewards when I'm able to help people restore where they want, where things are broken and where they want to be, right? So I get that reward, whether it's like weird, it's like whether I get paid or not. I mean, I'm not happy when I don't get paid because it's like, I would, I'd rather have that, but I do have that kind of intrinsic reward that happens there, um, which is, which is a little maybe some of my problem because I'm like self-rewarding some of those behaviors that are frankly detrimental to the pocketbook. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
So that's kind of
it 100%
what
makes
got me.
sense. And it's a good reflection back and how I would respond to that is, and this oftentimes comes up with clients, is your primary strengths become your first distortions. So you have a primary strength of this restorative quality, which is a quality that makes you good at what you do, because the general things that, at least I'm understanding what you help organizations with, is going to require that quality, right? If you are the one that brings order to their chaos in terms of the people, that's a good quality to have. That's a strength of yours. Like I said, I would do this for free because it's a natural expression of who I am.
Right.
So this isn't a conversation about suppressing that. It's about embracing the strength you do have. But where it becomes a distortion is when you begin to apply that strength, or a part of you needs to apply that strength in areas where it shouldn't be applied. Namely, all of these patterns you are talking about, overgiving, overdoing, etc. Your 50% of that equation is you set no boundaries. You have a hard
Right.
time saying no. So
Sure.
where you lack the assertiveness, you lack the identity, like characteristic of saying no, that is when your strength becomes a distortion, because now there is no line to draw on what is valuable and what isn't, what I'm going
Right.
to charge for, what I'm going to give for free, what I'm not going to give for free. When somebody's overstepping, I don't say no, I just continue to give because that is my natural quality. That's great. But then it's like my identity right now is rooted in someone who doesn't say no, doesn't set those boundaries, doesn't and isn't practiced in that assertiveness.
Yeah.
So what align or what lands for you with all of that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's like almost if I'm getting what you're saying there, it's almost like uh what keeps people who have a hobby and say that they want to make a hobby a business, right? That that's kind of what keeps them from success is that they'll just keep doing that thing, whether it's begetting them, you know, profit or not. They'll continue to do it. It's kind of feels the same way here, like like my hobby of of uh volunteerism is uh stepping on my toes, and like I said, distorting what's probably important. Did I get that? Does that
I mean,
reflect back?
if that's what landed for you, that's totally fine. What I would then reflect back to you is, do you want a hobby or do you want a business?
Right, right. That's what I was saying is, that there's so many people who, and I guess I'm in the same boat here, right? And I don't want another hobby.
Okay.
I've got too
So
many of those.
fair
I
enough.
need,
So
yeah,
what is it that you do want?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I want and need a a business that's sustainable, that continues to generate revenue and eventually generate revenue with or without me. That's where ultimately I want to go. Yeah.
So basically, I want to create a business that could potentially outlive me and be running like a machine that doesn't require me to overwork, overdo, overgive, so that I also have time and money to write a book, speak, be
Yeah.
that trusted, like all the other
And
things you
right.
mentioned.
And delivers the type of value that I can still deliver, but like I said, like preferably like again, with or without me, or having it replicable by somebody else, that would be,
Yeah,
yeah, that worked quite well with, again, going back to the sign company, you're building something so you can train somebody to build this other thing, deliver that, install it or whatever. Um, if I could figure out how to do that in this consulting thing, that would be super.
100%. And I think that's a beautiful vision and ultimately like like it's your version of what all business owners want, which is to have this machine that runs with minimal input from them,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So then the question becomes, if we're working backwards from that, there's going to be a skill aspect to that. So it's like, okay, well, you've demonstrated you had some of those skills in the sign shop. So I would venture to guess that they're also transferable and you can utilize those skills to build up whatever systems you need in this business.
Sure.
Okay. So if that's true, then really it comes back to, do I have an identity that's going to be anchored in the kind of leadership it's going to take to build those systems, given everything I've shared today?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Um, I'm not sure how to do that, but
Which piece? You're not sure how to do which piece?
well, I'm not sure how to package up, like, in this OD, change leadership consulting model, how I can package up that to be. I have a system, like, it's replicable, but how could I'm struggling how I can make that, mm, something that can be replicable, not just by me, but by somebody else or some other delivery system. I'm not too sure about that,
Yeah,
but it's
that's a
it's
fair
worth it's
question.
worth a thought.
100%. And I think it's going to be a necessary ingredient in the vision you outlined. I think a more important question for you to ask yourself in the short term
Hmm.
is, right now, it's like, what is a bigger limiting factor? Is it lacking the skill or knowledge on how to build that replicable machine? Or is it the identity that has kept me overdoing and overgiving up until this point? Like, what do you think is the bigger limiter to you right now?
Uh, well, um, I think it might honestly, I mean, just talking through this, the first part, because it feels like, I have this business, I have this service that I can offer, but I don't, it's not a product per se, dude. Does that make sense? Right? It's
Mhm.
not something that is something that I feel like it's easy for me to take to market, because it's right now it's it has to be so customized for everybody that it's hard for me to take it to market as its own unique product.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Because I mean, and that so I think that is very important, and probably a little more so than the giving of, my time and all that stuff. I guess if I was, that's probably get in the way of building this thing.
Okay. So I think that's a very
Yeah.
important point.
Well, but
So right now, I know that I need to figure out how to package this thing to essentially create this business machine that is my dream.
right.
It's pretty unique given the fact that I have a unique skill set. A lot of the thing that I do is customized, and right now requires me to kind of do it because I am the expert. And like I said, like we read your intro, it's a very impressive intro with regards to the history that you've had.
Thanks.
So that makes sense given that that is your experience.
Right.
As you were talking that out, the last thing that you said is, well, I guess I can't really figure that part out. This unique thing that makes my business unique and that could take me to the next level, because the limiting factor is actually the fact that I spend 80% of my time overdoing and overgiving. So if we're talking about isolating the biggest limiting factor, is it actually the skill set, or is it actually the fact that I'm so overgiving and overdoing that I don't actually even have the bandwidth and capacity to figure that out?
I mean, yeah, it's the latter. I think I have the skill set. I think that has been, from a conceptual side, and the ability to sequence and see, what that's supposed to look like. So I think all the competencies are there. I don't think I have to invest in so much training on new skills and stuff like that. It is the kind of lack of time. And I kind of came to this realization last night, like I wanted to read, or not read, I wanted to write yesterday, right? And by the time I sat down in front of the computer, it was already like 9:30 at night, and I was like, I'm tapped. I got nothing left to give. I can't do this. So I put it down, and I'm going at it again today. But uh yeah, I think that's probably, I'm letting my energy supply run really low until I go, it's my thing, and I just don't have anything to give on it, if that makes sense.
Correct. So it sounds like what you're realizing is the core of my issue is really a capacity issue.
Yeah,
I don't have the bandwidth, I don't have the capacity to allocate enough of the mental resources to really solve the big problems in my business.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I see you kind of shaking your head at that. So like, is that a new realization for you, or like where are you at with?
That is fair. That is fairly new. I mean, I can't say that it surprises me as much, but to actually say the words out loud is not something that I probably have done anytime recently anyway. Yep. So,
Perfect. So if we're now working backwards from there, kind of, because essentially we backwards engineer this whole thing to kind of get to here.
okay.
Right. So my core issue now I see is actually a capacity issue. Well, okay, what's driving that? Well, 80% of my time is spent overdoing, overgiving. Okay, cool. What's driving that? Well, one, Big factor is I have a hard time saying no, and then I end up volunteering time. Okay, cool. So what's driving that? Well, then I also have a lot of thoughts that go and support that. I have to discount, I have to volunteer, I have to be altruistic. Okay, well, now you've basically traced it back to this is the way that I actually think. And if we're going back to that working definition of identity, right? What I think, feel, and act on a
Hmm.
regular basis is a reflection of my identity. This is why, likely, the reason you don't have to try not to steal is simply because stealing is not a reflection of who you are. You don't have to try, you don't have to work yourself up, you don't have to like think your way into like not stealing. You just don't steal because it's not who you are,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So right now, if we're applying the same model into what you're doing, who I am fundamentally, for better or for worse, is someone who has a hard time saying no, which ends up with me overgiving, overdoing. And the ripple effects of that is that it's creating a lack of capacity issue that really doesn't allow me to move forward.
Right.
Now, if you're looking at all of that, at least in the short to medium term, what is the biggest limiting factor for you? Is it identity or is it skills?
Um, it's identity. It's identity. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And
For sure.
in your words, why do you think that is the case?
Yeah. It's identity because I think I've been coached and trained and have the experience of doing the things that are supposed to be done. I've helped companies throughout my entire career to, you know, either gain more revenue or grow, so growing their business, or to cut back on costs and be more efficient. And so I know, so from a skill perspective, I know I can do that stuff because I've done it before. I'm not doing it for myself.
Yeah,
So it's not a skills thing. It's an identity thing.
correct. So basically, my skill and competency are all the way up here because I've invested years of my time, money, and experience in like learning about these things, getting coached on these things. So it's like, I have like 100 points in the skills and competency bucket,
Right.
but it was at the expense of actually investing in the identity piece,
Right.
right? Which, for lack of example, that's like 20, 30 points right now.
Right. Right.
So that gap, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and what I've done, this is weird, man, because what I've done is instead so skills here's the my identity problem. As I'm like, okay, I'm stuck. What do I do? Oh, I'm going to invest in more skills. So I get another certification, or I go and do, some other altruistic thing or whatever. And, so I keep building this part up, but this part stays, here or moves down, Yeah.
Correct. And again, I acknowledge you for being open to receive that because literally that pattern you just described, that is so much of the patterns that I see with entrepreneurs, where they come onto the podcast or they're come on as clients. It's like so much time, money, and resources are spent in bettering their craft, which I fully support, by the way. I think you
Sure.
need to be an expert in what you do if you're going to charge money for it. And the recognition that that is basically like, it's basically a difference between like velocity and speed. I can go really quickly and cover a lot of distance going in the wrong direction, but the whole time, all I needed to do was actually just change the direction. Even if I'm moving slowly, I would get closer to what it is that I actually want.
Right.
And right now, if the biggest limiter is, like you said, that gap between my identity and my competency, even if I make, little bit of progress on the identity piece, it's going to compound into better results across the board.
Sure.
Simple example is if I up leveled the part of my identity that allowed me to be more assertive. And all I did was draw boundaries. Well, I can see right off the bat of everything you described, I would stop compensating for, or rather in your instance, because it's not really a team member, so it's more, I'm overgiving, right? So I
Mhm.
would stick to scope. If
Right,
we go outside of scope, right off the bat, you charge more money.
right.
So that would go to your bottom line.
Sure.
When I'm negotiating, I would negotiate against myself.
Right.
I would honor my value and the massive experience. Again, going into the whole competency thing, like how much competence you actually have. Are you actively charging for that? If the first thought in your head is, I got to be altruistic, likely not. So it's like we haven't even started looking at the day to day, but right off the bat, you're getting more of what you actually need, which is that cash flow, as just from one quality of your identity, which is in this instance assertiveness and boundaries.
Sure. Sure.
So what's landing for you with all of that?
Yeah. Oh man. Uh, well, I mean, what's landing is right now. I now I'm trying to figure out how do I change that? I mean, I'm always getting people telling me stop with this part, right? Like please don't, you don't need any more of this part, but oh, this part here, um, I don't know where to how to move that.
Well,
You know,
fortunately, you're talking to the right person because that's all I do.
that's what you
Just
do, right?
up level the identity piece, right?
Right,
So
right,
it's kind of like if I've spent so many of my patterns getting coaching, investing into bettering my skill set, asking for support on the competency side, I've neglected the identity side. So it's like,
right,
well, if you've seen that investing in competency in one area has worked for you, and I've neglected this other side,
right,
and and I know I'm biased in this thing, but it's like, yeah, then the fastest path towards improving this is going to be investing in up leveling my identity. Because
right.
if I can do even just a bit more of that, it basically compounds because you have such a high like skill quotient, for lack of better terminology.
Which is
So
it's so interesting that like that we're here because like I have taken every personality test, competency test, the DISC, the Myers-Briggs, the Big Five, the Strengths Finder, Enneagram, uh, and then even an aptitude test. So like this whole like identity and knowing myself, and that part I've invested a lot in. But it's interesting because I can see what you're saying about how knowing all of that has distorted. There's that, like you said, the first distortion of, what, like who I am and what value I bring. Um, boy, I'm befuddled.
that's it's all good. I'm glad that this is landing for you. And I just want to add a nuance to what you shared. Because oftentimes when people have this realization, there's like this fault portion that comes out that like judges, well, man, I've like invested and done all this stuff. Like, was this all just wasted time? Like, what the hell kind of thing, right?
Yeah, right,
So natural reaction. And what I just want to point out to you, it's like that got you here,
right,
right? It
right.
wasn't wasted time. It's
Sure.
just what is needed for the dreams that you have and where you want to take your business is not going to be found in the things you did before.
Yeah,
Because if it was, like you said at the beginning, we wouldn't need to be here.
sure.
So the additional part to that is you've invested in things that give you more awareness around who you are, which is always going to be the first step, which
Yeah, yeah,
creates a
sure.
very good tapestry to do this work. The second part that you're essentially missing out of the embodiment piece is not the awareness, but like the embodiment piece. Am I thinking, feeling, and acting in alignment with what my business needs to move forward?
Yeah,
And awareness and embodiment, they're literally two different portions of your brain. They require two different approaches. And while you do need some awareness because you can't change what you can't see, the actual change piece you can't get from an assessment.
Sure,
So
sure.
it's not about negating all of that. It's just really recognizing, okay, if I want to move where I say I want to move, then I just got to reallocate resources to the thing that I've been neglecting, not let's hate and go into a doom spiral and all the things that I've done so far.
Right. Okay. Well, that's
Good.
that's
I'm
good
glad
because
that, that
yeah, I
that's
don't want to go into a
tangible.
doom spiral.
Yeah, that's
Enough
fair.
of that happens. It's on that assessment. So,
Correct. Well, you don't really have to work too hard. They kind of start automatically. It's more
yeah, that's right.
how do I
Yes.
avoid going into them? So I get that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that we're good on time. Is this clear with regards to like what your biggest blocks are to moving to where you want to be?
Yes, this has been very, very helpful in figuring that out. Thank you very much. Yeah.
You're very welcome. So in that case, you just feel free to close us off by letting everybody know who to find you or like best person to find you, where they can find you. Like floor is
Oh,
yours.
sure.
But
Sure, 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 sure. So yeah, I mean the best folks to that that we work with are small business owners with teams of 10 or more that are typically in the B2B space, so industrial, professional services, manufacturing. Those tend to be pretty good sweet spots for us. We also work with a few nonprofits. Um, and you can reach us at www.workbalanceconsulting.com. We also have a blog and podcast over at harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we really encourage you to go and take a look at the Harmonious Workplaces website because there we partner with some other industrial organizational psychology, change management, and organizational development professionals, really trying to build a knowledge base of resources for the community as a whole in the business realm. Yeah.
love it. Well, as always, we'll include that in the show notes. But Rich, thank you very much for coming on and allowing yourself to be seen in this way. And for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks a million. Oh, it was a real treat. Thanks a million.
You're very welcome.